The Chinese Communist Party is always shouting about strengthening their military. This topic really needs to be discussed. Look at the other countries of similar size, like Canada and Australia. They don't even take military strength seriously. And then there's India next door with its massive population, but they aren't frantically training their soldiers like the CCP. To be honest, if there's anyone else in the world who loves to compare military expansion with the CCP, it's probably Russia. These two are like twin brothers, connected by their association with the enemy of humanity, communism. They fear being eliminated by the rest of the world, so they relentlessly expand their territories and go head-to-head with the United States. So the CCP spends a fortune on their military, replacing their air force with new planes, launching new navy ships like they're making dumplings, and stockpiling missiles and nuclear weapons. They certainly look aggressive, but let's not forget, no matter how advanced the equipment, if the soldiers aren't skilled in combat, it's all just for show. Take Russia, for example. They were all bluster until they actually had to fight, and then their true colors showed. The same goes for the CCP military. Look closely and you'll see their training is unscientific. Their equipment is poor, and their logistics are insufficient. When it comes to actual combat, they still rely on human wave tactics, using their soldiers as cannon fodder. The People's Liberation Army has made some progress over the years, but catching up to the US is still a pipe dream. Speaking of PLA training, there's a story about a new recruit worth mentioning. In a certain regiment in the southeast coastal region, there's this new recruit. He was 175 centimeters tall and weighed 72 kilograms, 158 pounds, when he joined. After 3 months of basic training, his weight dropped to 58 kilograms, leaving him looking like a skeleton, with barely any noticeable muscle left. There are many subjects in basic training, but each one includes running. Even during battlefield first aid training, if the instructor asks you if you're cold and you say yes, they'll suggest a relay race to warm you up. Before shooting practice, the instructor likes to hold a 400-meter race with 40 new recruits, only taking the top 3 each time. You can't save your energy, you have to run hard. If you don't make the top 3, you'll have to run more. After evening roll call, there's a 770-meter run around the fly-infested lawn. You'll have to run hard because if you lose, you'll have to keep running, and who knows how many laps you'll end up doing. At night, there are 100 push-ups, 100 squats, and 100 sit-ups. Often, it's more than that. Each person has a newspaper under them, and they have to sweat enough to wet the newspaper to be considered done. Is this training? It's pure torture. In the Chinese military, it's all about pushing soldiers to their limits. Many soldiers end up exhausting their bodies, some get heat stroke during training, and some even keep going with a fever. Some run until they fracture bones, and some tear ligaments, ending up with a limp for life. The US military doesn't do these pointless exercises. Their training is personalized, taking each soldier's physical condition into account. Is basic training tough? Sure, it's tough, but it won't push you to death. Instructors closely monitor the soldiers' physical responses and adjust the training intensity to avoid injuries. A retired veteran also admitted that in terms of strength, endurance, and other physical training aspects, the Chinese military currently lags behind the US military. This gap is due to both the physical differences between Eastern and Western people and the training methods. In exercises, there's a high ground at an altitude of 1,530 meters. Although it doesn't look high, few in the unit can scale it in one go, yet such a terrain is precisely where battles are most frequent. As for logistics, the CCP's logistics soldiers can't even distinguish between instant noodles and compressed biscuits. In Chinese military camps, the common meals are simple. In the morning, there's just steamed buns, porridge, and soy milk. For lunch and dinner, it's rice with 5 dishes and a soup with very little meat. The vegetables are grown by the soldiers themselves, but to ensure each person gets 100 grams of meat, they have to buy nearly 10 kilograms for about 90 people due to budget constraints. The food is so bland that the soldiers are all skinny. In contrast, the US military's meals are much richer. In their dining halls, there's usually a variety of main dishes and hot dishes to choose from, with a balance of meat and vegetables and a focus on nutrition. Many bases have burger joints, pizza places, and other fast food options. On holidays, they provide special meals like steak and turkey. Daily mealtimes and portions are also more generous. Let's talk about the air transport capabilities of the Chinese military. Right now, they really don't have enough transport planes and helicopters. A few years ago, during live fire exercises in the South China Sea, the Chinese Marine Corps almost starved. If it were the US military, they could airlift an entire brigade's equipment at any time and have specialized transport helicopters to set up field hospitals. In contrast, China was relying on civilian charter flights. It's not the same at all. Some might argue that the Chinese military has the Y-20 transport aircraft and their numbers are increasing. But let's be realistic. The Y-20 has only been produced in small quantities, just a few dozen planes so far. Compared to the US military's C-5, C-17, and C-130, it's like a drop in the bucket. Moreover, the Chinese military lacks real-world experience with large transport planes and long-distance deployments. It's still uncertain if they can manage it. Although the Chinese military constantly talks about joint operations, it's unclear who supports whom and how logistical support will keep up. The Chinese military has limited experience, whereas the US military has elite logistics and seamless cooperation among various branches. The Chinese military still needs to conduct more live drills. Currently, it's mostly just talk. Chinese military training is indeed intense, encompassing training, duty, and even farming. Despite regulations to ensure adequate sleep, soldiers often end up standing guard, farming in the morning, cleaning in the evening, writing self-criticisms, and repairing weapons. They are so busy that the day feels like it's being used twice. Although lights are supposed to be out by 9 p.m., it's a challenge to get to bed even by midnight. The US military is different. Unless absolutely necessary, they ensure soldiers get rest by 10 p.m. They strictly enforce lights out because they understand the importance of maintaining soldiers' health. Regarding individual equipment, the Chinese military's gear is quite pitiful. Take the Type 79 bulletproof vest, for example. The plates inside are basically thin steel. They later switched to Kevlar fiber with ceramic plates, but the protection is still subpar. Russia imported similar vests from China, and they failed on the battlefield, with Ukrainian forces selling them online because they were so ineffective. A Chinese-made bulletproof plate costing around 1,000 yuan can stop AK bullets, but it deforms so badly that the wearer ends up in the ICU. Chinese soldiers wearing such vests in battle are at a huge disadvantage. Chinese military gear often suffers from poor ergonomic design. The load-bearing and securing systems are crude, and some key components are made from unsuitable materials. This makes the gear uncomfortable and inflexible for soldiers during combat. For example, the radio pack that communication soldiers carry often can't secure the radio, requiring one hand to hold it in place. Magazine pouches are made of soft fabric, making it slow to change magazines. Some vests have integrated magazine pouches that can't be removed, and detachable ones often swing during running. Riot gear vests are sometimes made of synthetic leather instead of nylon, which is just ridiculous. Quick release buckles on gear could be better quality. Adding a nylon strap to secure the radio pack wouldn't hurt. Providing space for a pistol on the vest and balancing the weight distribution could also be considered. These aren't costly fixes, it's more about the mindset. These small issues can easily tire out soldiers and reduce their combat effectiveness. In field conditions, equipment crucial for soldier survival is often inconvenient to use. In winter, for instance, they don't even have decent insulated water bottles, making it hard to get a drink of hot water. Water bladders are issued, but they don't retain heat as well as insulated bottles. The designers of this equipment often have little practical experience, having worked in research institutes straight out of university for decades without field experience. They don't use weapons or understand tactical movements, so it's no wonder their designs are impractical. They also tend to copy designs from others, making tweaks to avoid detection, but these changes often result in unusable equipment. Let's talk about high-tech individual equipment. The gap between the US and China in this area is also significant. In US combat units, every soldier has a night vision device, whereas in the Chinese PLA, a regular infantry squad has only 2. Reconnaissance companies have a bit more, but it's still not enough for combat. The Chinese military also has individual water purifiers, but their reliability is low, and they struggle to meet combat demands. The replacement of RO filter membranes is also an issue. Overall, the Chinese military has made progress in individual equipment construction in recent years, but they're still far from meeting combat needs and improving soldier experience. Compared to the US military, China's logistics and individual equipment are very outdated, and there's no hope of closing the gap in the short term. In combat, gunshot wounds are the most common injuries. Without rapid and effective battlefield first aid and surgery, the mortality rate of the wounded increases significantly. Chinese military doctors have limited experience dealing with gunshot wounds. In peacetime, military doctors are busy with disease prevention and treatment. Civilian hospitals rarely see gunshot wounds, as China's strict gun control laws have virtually eliminated such injuries among civilians. In contrast, the U.S. has frequent domestic shootings and ongoing military conflicts. Their military and civilian doctors deal with gunshot wounds daily, accumulating a wealth of experience. A field hospital in the U.S. division can treat hundreds of gunshot wounds in a year. This level of practical experience is far beyond what Chinese military doctors have. Regarding talent development, many PLA officers have only associate degrees, and some even have only junior high school education. This leads to overall low cultural literacy, making it difficult for them to learn and master modern weapons and equipment. The education level of soldiers is also generally low, mostly junior high and high school graduates, limiting their ability to use advanced equipment. In contrast, U.S. military officers are elite with at least high school education and receive comprehensive training, making them highly proficient in combat. The PLA also faces significant barriers between different military branches, leading to a lack of understanding and coordination of each other's operational processes and needs. Training focuses too much on high-level coordination, with insufficient integration at the grassroots level, making tactical coordination challenging. This is related to the career paths of Chinese generals. PLA generals generally rise through the ranks within a single branch, while U.S. generals often have cross-branch experience as they advance. This gives U.S. generals a richer perspective on joint operations, making their concepts and execution more mature. Therefore, the PLA lacks systematic and practical top-level design, system construction, and training methods for joint operations. Modern warfare emphasizes the ability to operate within a comprehensive system, involving sensing, command and control, and firepower. In these areas, the PLA still lags far behind the U.S. military. Take air superiority, for instance. The PLA cannot compete with the U.S. The U.S. has fighter jets patrolling 24/7, providing ground troops with constant aerial reconnaissance and fire support. Artillery support, armed helicopters, and even fighter jets are always on call. China's system is not yet fully developed, lacking sufficient aerial warning and strike platforms, leaving ground troops to rely on their firepower support. For over a decade, the Chinese military has recognized the importance of talent development and has taken various measures to improve the situation. For example, in January 2011, the PLA announced a 40% salary increase for its troops, along with additional benefits for those stationed in border areas and promising units. The central government also mandated state-owned enterprises to provide preferential treatment to retired officers in hopes of attracting more college graduates to join the army. The military's goal is to have 78% of its officers recruited from college graduates. However, these measures seem to have had limited success. Although some college students have been recruited, many only serve to fulfill their mandatory service and leave as soon as their term is up. Statistics show that only about 35% of soldiers in the Chinese military are willing to stay, and the retention rate among college graduates is even lower. In contrast, over 55% of U.S. soldiers choose to remain in the military. The gap between the two militaries in terms of building a stable and professional force is quite significant. The issue of low salaries for Chinese military personnel remains unresolved. For instance, a colonel's annual salary is around $37,200 and a major general's is about $42,000. In contrast, in 2021, even an ordinary U.S. Marine Corps soldier earned more annually than a PLA brigadier general. In addition, the U.S. has a dedicated Department of Veteran Affairs to protect the rights of retired military personnel, whereas Chinese veterans frequently protest due to lack of benefits. Another point is the imbalance in the use of China's large defense budget. Compared to the funds allocated for improving soldier salaries, more military spending is directed towards purchasing advanced equipment and weapons. Furthermore, poor management of these funds has led to corruption, with some reports of officers selling solid rocket fuel from missiles for personal gain. As a military executing the CCP's will, political work holds a significant place in the PLA. A considerable amount of time is spent on tasks and daily education to strengthen party awareness and loyalty. Political commissars hold crucial personnel powers, including decisions on promotions and disciplinary actions, sometimes even overriding military commanders, which affects the efficiency of the command system. For instance, in a 2018 airborne exercise accident, the Airborne Battalion performed a parachute jump in poor weather conditions, resulting in many injuries. When the political commissar took over the command, instead of quickly reorganizing the command structure to handle the crisis, he prioritized political work, delaying rescue efforts and causing substantial losses. Similar issues occurred during the Wenchuan earthquake rescue operations. In 2017, an infantry regiment reported that 40% of training time was occupied by political study and education activities, significantly reducing actual military training time. Additionally, major military operations require the approval of political commissars, limiting the autonomy of commanders. During the 1979 war with Vietnam, some units' political commissars had minimal military knowledge, severely impacting battlefield decisions and combat command, leading to unnecessary losses. In the long run, emphasizing loyalty to the party may lead military personnel to prioritize political performance over military capability, hindering the cultivation of military professionalism. This tendency was evident in some grassroots units before military reforms. An overly politicized environment detracts from focusing on training and combat readiness.